On the evening flight to New York, the first-class cabin gradually descended into tension. Serena Callahan, the young celebrated CEO, struggled desperately to soothe her infant son Henry, but to no avail. His cries tore through the silence, drawing irritated glances from passengers and confusion from the flight attendants. Serena bit her lip, her heart twisting with fear at the simmering anger in the aircraft cabin. And then, amid that suffocating atmosphere, Nathan Corbin, a single father from economy class, rose and moved forward. His action left everyone speechless. The autumn evening wrapped Boston Logan Airport in a golden haze as passengers boarded Flight 743 to New York. Among them was Serena Callahan, 34 years old, whose presence commanded attention even in the anonymous stream of travelers. Her tailored white blazer spoke of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. Her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the overhead lights as she navigated the narrow aisle with practiced grace. In her arms, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that cost more than most people's monthly rent, was 3-month-old Henry Callahan, his tiny face peaceful in sleep. Serena had built her empire in finance through sheer determination and brilliance, transforming a modest inheritance into a Fortune 500 company before her 30th birthday. The business press called her the Ice Queen of Wall Street, a moniker she wore like armor. But beneath that polished exterior, exhaustion pulled at every muscle. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours straight since Henry's birth. And the upcoming merger in New York could make or break her company's future. The deal documents in her leather briefcase represented 18 months of negotiations, and she trusted no one else to handle them. Henry's father had vanished the moment she'd told him about the pregnancy, leaving behind only a curt email about not being ready for fatherhood. The rejection had stung less than the timing right when she'd finally allowed herself to believe someone could love both the woman and the CEO. Now, settling into seat 2A with Henry cradled against her chest, Serena pushed those thoughts away. She had learned long ago that vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. Further back in economy class, Nathan Corbin helped his 7-year-old daughter Astrid buckle her seatbelt. At 36, Nathan carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced real flames and emerged stronger. His hands, scarred from years as a firefighter, moved with gentle precision as he tucked Astrid's favorite book into the seat pocket. She looked up at him with eyes that mirrored her late mother's bright, curious, unafraid. Nathan had left the fire department 3 years ago, after Claire died in a warehouse fire he'd been working. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. He'd saved dozens of strangers but couldn't save his own wife. Since then, he'd rebuilt their life piece by piece, working as a freelance mechanical engineer, while ensuring Astrid never doubted she was loved. This trip to Boston had been for a consulting job, just enough to cover Astrid's piano lessons for the next 6 months. They were returning to their small apartment in Queens, where photographs of Claire still smiled from the mantel, and Astrid's drawings covered the refrigerator. The plane pushed back from the gate as flight attendants completed their safety demonstrations. In first class, the atmosphere was one of muted luxury business executives already opening laptops, lawyers reviewing briefs, the quiet rustle of expensive fabric as passengers settled in for the 90-minute flight. The cabin lights dimmed to a warm glow, and for a moment, everything seemed perfectly orchestrated. Then Henry woke up. The first cry shattered the calm like a stone through glass. Serena's body tensed immediately, her nervous system flooding with the particular panic known only to new mothers in public spaces. She lifted Henry to her shoulder, patting his back in the rhythm she'd learned from countless YouTube videos watched at 3 in the morning. But Henry's cries only intensified, his tiny face reddening with distress. "Shh, sweetheart, Mommy's here," Serena whispered, her voice barely audible over his wails. She tried everything. The bottle she'd prepared, the pacifier, the gentle bouncing motion that sometimes worked at home. Nothing helped. If anything, Henry seemed to sense her rising anxiety, his cries escalating into the kind of screaming that made other parents wince in sympathy and non-parents question their life choices. The reactions came swiftly. A silver-haired woman in 3B, dripping in pearls and disapproval, turned to her companion with a stage whisper designed to be heard. "For what we pay for first class, you'd think they'd have some standards about bringing infants aboard." Her companion, a man whose Rolex caught the reading light, nodded vigorously. "It's inconsiderate, really. Some of us have important meetings tomorrow." Across the aisle, a venture capitalist Serena recognized from a conference last year was already pressing his call button. When the flight attendant arrived, He didn't lower his voice. "This is unacceptable. Can't you do something? Move them to the back, perhaps?" The flight attendant, a young woman whose name tag read Madison, maintained her professional smile while her eyes darted helplessly between the complainers and Serena. "I'm so sorry for the disturbance, sir. Perhaps I could bring you some complimentary noise-canceling headphones?" Serena felt her face burning with humiliation. These were her peers, people who'd praised her keynote speech at the Global Finance Summit just 2 months ago. Now they looked at her like she was any other desperate mother who couldn't control her child. She wanted to stand up and remind them who she was, what she'd accomplished, but Henry's cries made speech impossible. Her designer blouse was already damp with sweat, and what she suspected was spit up. The businessman in 2B, close enough that Serena could smell his aggressive cologne, leaned over. "Perhaps you should have considered a private jet, if you insist on traveling with an infant." His tone suggested he was doing her a favor with this advice. "Some of us are trying to work." He gestured to his laptop, where a spreadsheet glowed with numbers that Serena could tell at a glance were incorrectly calculated. Henry's cries reached a new pitch, the sound bouncing off the cabin walls and seeming to multiply. Serena felt tears prickling her own eyes. She'd negotiated with Fortune 100 CEOs, had stared down hostile takeover attempts, had built her company from nothing, but she couldn't quiet her own son. The weight of her inadequacy pressed down like a physical thing. What kind of mother couldn't comfort her baby? What kind of woman was she, really, beneath all the success? In seat 23C, Nathan heard every cry with the clarity of experience. He recognized the particular pitch that meant the baby was overwhelmed, overstimulated, caught in a feedback loop of distress. Beside him, Astrid looked up from her book about dragons and knights. "Daddy, that baby sounds really sad," she said softly. "Like I was after Mommy went to heaven." Nathan's throat tightened. He remembered those nights vividly, Astrid sobbing until she could barely breathe, his own helplessness in the face of grief too large for a 4-year-old to process. He'd learned through trial and error what worked. The specific rhythm of movement, the low humming that seemed to resonate with something primal, the way to hold a child so they felt completely secure. "Stay here, sweetheart," he told Astrid, unbuckling his seatbelt. "I'm going to see if I can help." The walk from economy to first class felt like crossing a battlefield. Flight attendants looked alarmed. As he passed the curtain divider economy, passengers didn't venture into first class without invitation. But Nathan had spent years running into burning buildings while others ran out. This was nothing compared to that. The scene in first class was worse than he'd imagined. The young mother he could see, she was young despite her sophisticated appearance, looked on the verge of collapse. Her hands shook as she tried to hold the bottle to the baby's mouth, and he could see the glisten of unshed tears in her eyes. The other passengers had created a circle of judgment around her, their disapproval as palpable as smoke. Nathan approached slowly, making sure Serena could see him coming. He kept his voice low and calm, the tone he'd used with victims in shock. "Excuse me, ma'am. I know you don't know me, but I've been where you are. My daughter went through a phase where she cried for hours every night. Would you mind if I tried something? Sometimes a different pair of arms makes all the difference." Serena looked up at him, and for a moment, her CEO mask slipped entirely. He saw raw desperation, the kind that made people do things they'd never normally consider. She glanced around the cabin, at all the watching eyes, and he saw her calculate the risk, hand her baby to a complete stranger from economy class. Her reputation was already in tatters for the evening. What did she have to lose? Yes, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "His name is Henry." Nathan took the baby with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent countless nights walking colicky infants through dark hallways. The first thing he did was adjust Henry's position, bringing him up against his chest with the baby's ear pressed to his heartbeat. Then he started moving, not the frantic bouncing Serena had been attempting, but a slow, steady sway that mimicked the rhythm of walking. "Hey there, little man," Nathan murmured, his voice dropping to a low rumble. I know. The world's too big and too bright sometimes, isn't it? But you're safe. You're okay." He began humming, an old lullaby Claire used to sing to Astrid, something her Irish grandmother had passed down. The melody was simple, repetitive, designed to sync with breathing and heartbeat. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was remarkable. Henry's cries began to hiccup, then softened to whimpers. Nathan kept up the steady movement, one hand supporting Henry's head, the other patting a slow rhythm on his back. Within 3 minutes, the baby's eyes were drooping. Within 5, Henry was asleep, his tiny fist clutching Nathan's shirt collar. The first-class cabin fell into stunned silence. Even the silver-haired woman who'd been complaining seemed frozen, her mouth slightly open as if she'd forgotten what she was about to say. The venture capitalist slowly closed his laptop. Madison, the flight attendant, stood in the aisle with tears in her eyes. "I've been flying for 8 years," Madison said softly, "and I've never seen anything like that. You're like some kind of baby whisperer." Nathan smiled slightly, still maintaining the gentle sway even though Henry was deeply asleep. No magic to it, just experience and patience. Babies can sense stress. The more anxious everyone gets, the more they cry. It's a vicious cycle. He looked at Serena, who was staring at him as if he'd performed an actual miracle. "He's a beautiful boy. Just overwhelmed, that's all." Carefully, Nathan transferred Henry back to Serena's arms, showing her the exact position and rhythm to maintain. "Keep him up high like this, so he can hear your heartbeat. And try to keep your breathing slow and steady, he'll match it eventually." Serena took her son back, her hands steadier now. "Thank you," she breathed. And those 2 words carried more weight than any of the $1 million deals she'd closed. I can't tell you what this means." Nathan turned to head back to economy, but Madison stopped him. "Sir, we have an empty seat here in first class. Given the circumstances, I think it would be helpful if you stayed close by, just in case." She glanced meaningfully at Serena, who nodded quickly. "My daughter is in 23C, Nathan said. "I can't leave her alone." "I'll bring her up," Madison said immediately. There are 2 empty seats together in row 5. And so Nathan found himself sitting in first class for the first time in his life, Astrid beside him wide-eyed at the larger seats and extra legroom. She'd brought her book, but seemed more interested in watching Henry sleep peacefully in Serena's arms. "You did a nice thing, Daddy," Astrid whispered. "Mommy would be proud." The mention of Claire sent the familiar ache through Nathan's chest, but it was softer now, worn smooth by time like a river stone. "She would have done the same thing, sweetheart. She always said helping someone costs nothing but means everything." Serena heard the exchange, and something in her chest loosened. She'd been so focused on maintaining her image, on being the perfect CEO, that she'd forgotten the simple power of human kindness. This man, this stranger who clearly had his own struggles, had seen her drowning and thrown her a lifeline without hesitation. "I'm Serena," she said quietly, not wanting to wake Henry. "This is my first time flying with him alone. Actually, it's my first time doing most things with him alone." "Nathan," he replied, then gestured to his daughter. "This is Astrid. She's my co-pilot in pretty much everything these days." Astrid beamed at being introduced. "I'm 7 3/4, she announced in that serious way children had of marking time. "I like books about dragons and playing piano and helping Daddy fix things. Henry's very small." "Was I ever that small?" "Even smaller," Nathan told her. "You were born 6 weeks early. Spent your first month in the NICU. Your mom and I took shifts, so you were never alone." Serena caught the past tense, the careful way he mentioned his wife. She recognized the rhythm of loss. In his words, she'd heard it in her own voice when mentioning her father, who died when she was 22, just before she'd started her company. He'd never seen her success, never knew he'd raised a daughter who would conquer Wall Street. "You're raising her alone?" Serena asked gently. Nathan nodded. 3 years now. Her mom was a firefighter too. We worked the same station." He paused, choosing his words carefully in front of Astrid. "There was an accident on the job. Claire didn't make it out." The weight of those simple words hung between them. Serena thought of all the times she'd complained about doing this alone, when Nathan had no choice in his solitude. "I'm so sorry," she said, meaning it. "That must be incredibly difficult." "It was," Nathan said honestly. "Some days it still is. But we found our rhythm, didn't we, Princess?" He ruffled Astrid's hair. We learned that mac and cheese for breakfast is perfectly acceptable in emergencies, that mismatched socks aren't a crisis, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is just show up and try your best. Serena looked down at Henry, still sleeping peacefully. I don't think I know how to try my best at this. I know how to run a company, how to read markets and predict trends, but I look at him and I'm terrified I'm going to break him somehow. That I'm not. Enough. Can I tell you a secret? Nathan leaned in conspiratorially. That fear never really goes away. But it's not a bug. It's a feature. The fact that you're scared means you care. The parents who think they have it all figured out are the ones who worry me. Their conversation was interrupted by turbulence, sudden and violent. The plane dropped sharply, then jerked upward. The cabin lights flickered. Passengers gasped and grabbed their armrests. Henry woke with a piercing scream, his little body rigid with fear. Serena panicked, her arms tightening around Henry, which only made him cry harder. The plane shook again, more violently. Someone's drink crashed to the floor. The overhead bins rattled ominously. In the chaos, Serena felt herself spiraling into pure terror, not just from the turbulence, but from the complete loss of control. She couldn't protect Henry from this. She couldn't negotiate with gravity or leverage her influence against physics. Nathan moved without thinking, pure instinct honed by years of emergency response. He reached across, not taking Henry, but creating a protective bubble around both mother and child. One arm braced against Serena's seat. The other helped support Henry's weight so Serena didn't have to fight the violent movement alone. Look at me, he said firmly, his paramedic training kicking in. Serena, eyes on me. Breathe in through your nose, count of 4. Hold it. Out through your mouth, count of 4. The plane is fine, this is normal turbulence. You're safe. Henry's safe. Serena locked eyes with him, finding an anchor in the storm. His eyes were steady, calm. The kind of presence that made people believe everything would be okay even when buildings were burning. She matched her breathing to his counting. Gradually, her panic receded. Now, Henry needs to feel you're not scared, Nathan continued, still maintaining that protective position as the plane bucked again. Sing something, anything. Doesn't matter if you can't carry a tune. He just needs to hear your voice being calm. Serena's mind went blank. The only song she could think of was something her grandmother used to sing, an old folk tune about sailing ships and stars. Her voice was shaky at first, barely audible over the sound of the straining engines. But Nathan nodded encouragingly, and Astrid, brave little soul that she was, started humming along even though she didn't know the words. Slowly, incrementally, Henry's cries softened. The turbulence continued for 5 more minutes that felt like hours. But wrapped in this strange cocoon of protection, Nathan's steadying presence, Astrid's sweet humming, her own voice, finding strength, Serena discovered something she'd lost. The ability to be vulnerable without being weak. When the plane finally steadied, the captain's voice came over the intercom, apologizing for the unexpected rough air and assuring everyone they were through the worst of it. Nathan slowly withdrew, giving Serena back her space, but she found herself missing the security of his presence immediately. "Thank you," she said, and then surprised herself by adding, "I'm not used to needing help." "Neither was I," Nathan admitted. "After Claire died, I tried to do everything myself, nearly drove myself into the ground before I realized that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. We're not meant to do this alone." Something in those words cracked open the vault Serena had built around her heart. All the pressure she'd been carrying to be perfect, to never show weakness, to prove she could have it all suddenly seemed unbearably heavy. To her horror, she felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she gasped, mortified to be crying in first class, in front of strangers. "I don't usually blank. Daddy cries sometimes too." Astrid piped up matter-of-factly. "He says tears are just love, with nowhere to go. When he misses Mommy, he cries and then we make cocoa and look at pictures and tell happy stories." Nathan's face flushed slightly at his daughter's revelation. But he didn't deny it. Astrid's right. Crying is just part of being human. Even CEOs are allowed to be human. Serena let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I don't think that was in my contract. Might want to renegotiate, Nathan said with a gentle smile. I hear the benefits of being human include authentic connections, genuine joy, and the ability to ask for help without the world ending. They talked for the rest of the flight, their conversation flowing with surprising ease. Nathan told her about his work as a mechanical engineer, how he'd started taking contracts he could do from home, so he could be there when Astrid got home from school. Serena found herself opening up about the loneliness at the top, how success had become a prison of other people's expectations. The worst part, she admitted, is that I love my work. I'm good at it. But everyone acts like I have to choose be a good CEO or a good mother, as if I can't possibly do both. Who says you have to be good at both right away? Nathan asked. When I started my engineering consultancy, I made every mistake possible. Undercharged. Overcommitted. Nearly lost a client's entire project to a corrupted file because I forgot to back up. But each mistake taught me something. Henry stirred in Serena's arms, making soft baby noises that weren't quite crying. Without being asked, Nathan reached into his carry-on and pulled out a small stuffed elephant, worn soft with love. This was Astrid's when she was a baby. We bring it for emergencies. Mr. Peanuts, Astrid exclaimed. But Daddy, that's special. Exactly why Henry should have him for now, Nathan said. Special things are meant to be shared. Watching him gently tuck the elephant next to Henry, Serena felt something shift in her chest. This man, who had every reason to hold tight to the remnants of his past, was teaching his daughter generosity in the face of loss. It was a kind of strength she'd never seen in her boardrooms. As the plane began its descent into New York, the cabin crew prepared for landing. The same passengers who'd been shooting angry glares earlier were now stealing glances at Nathan with something approaching respect. The silver-haired woman even caught Serena's eye and mouthed, "Beautiful baby." Madison approached with a warm smile. "We'll be landing in about 10 minutes. I wanted to thank you, sir," she said to Nathan. "You turned what could have been a miserable flight into something quite special." After landing, as passengers stood to retrieve their belongings, Nathan helped Serena with her bags while Astrid carefully held Henry's diaper bag. It was such a simple thing, but Serena realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had helped her without expecting something in return. In the jet bridge, Serena turned to Nathan, suddenly reluctant to let this unexpected connection end. Would you and Astrid like to share a cab? I have a car waiting, actually. It's the least I can do. Nathan hesitated. And she recognized the pride there, the same pride that made her refuse help even when she was drowning. That's kind of you. But we're heading to Queens. That's pretty far out of your way. Actually, I'd like to know you made it home safely, Serena said, surprising herself with the honesty. Both of you. And Henry seems quite attached to Mr. Peanuts. Astrid looked up at her father with pleading eyes. Please, Daddy? Henry needs Mr. Peanuts for tonight. That's how they ended up in Serena's town car, Astrid chattering excitedly about her school's upcoming science fair, while Henry slept peacefully with the stuffed elephant. Nathan caught Serena's eye in the reflection of the window and smiled a quiet, understanding smile that said he knew what it was like to find unexpected grace in difficult moments. When they reached Nathan's building in Queens, a modest but well-maintained apartment complex, Serena felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. This felt like an ending. But she wasn't ready for it to be. Would you like to come up for that cocoa Astrid mentioned? Nathan offered. Fair warning. Our apartment is nothing fancy. And there might be Legos on the floor. Daddy, you vacuumed today, Astrid protested. It's very clean, and we have the good cocoa. The one with tiny marshmallows. Serena looked at Henry, still sleeping peacefully. Then at Nathan and Astrid's expectant faces. Her phone had been buzzing with emails about tomorrow's merger meeting, but for once, the pull of work felt less urgent than this moment. I love tiny marshmallows, she said. The apartment was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like it at all. Yes, it was small and modest. But it was also warm and lived in a way her penthouse never was. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator. Photos lined the mantel. Nathan and Claire on their wedding day, Astrid as a baby, family trips to the beach. This was a home shaped by love and loss, and the decision to keep going anyway. While Nathan made cocoa and Astrid showed Serena every single one of her drawings, explaining the stories behind them with 7-year-old intensity, Serena felt herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. Henry woke up hungry, and Nathan showed her a different way to hold the bottle that seemed to work better. When Henry fussed afterward, Astrid sang him the song her mother used to sing, her young voice sweet and sure. "You should come to my science fair," Astrid announced suddenly. "I'm doing a project about how buildings stay up even when they're really tall. Daddy's been helping me with the engineering parts." "Astrid," Nathan said gently, "Serena's very busy. She runs a big company." But Serena found herself saying, "When is it?" "2 weeks from Friday," Astrid said eagerly. "At 2 o'clock. There's a parents' tea afterward, but Daddy has to leave early for a client meeting, so I'll be the only one without someone at the tea, but that's okay because Mrs. Rodriguez says I can help her clean up instead." The matter-of-fact acceptance in the child's voice broke Serena's heart a little. She looked at Nathan, who was trying to hide his own pain at not being able to stay for the whole event. "What if I came?" Serena heard herself say. "To the tea. I mean, if that's okay with your dad?" Astrid's face lit up like Times Square. "Really? You'd come to my school?" "Astrid, we can't ask," Nathan started. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Serena met his eyes. "That is, if it's okay with you." Something passed between them, an understanding that this was about more than a science fair. This was about 2 broken families, maybe finding a way to help each other heal. Over the next weeks, what started as a science fair invitation grew into something more. Serena would text Nathan when Henry had a difficult night, and he'd call with advice and encouragement. Nathan would send photos of Astrid's engineering projects, and Serena would share them with her bewildered board members who couldn't understand why their CEO was suddenly interested in second-grade science. The day of the science fair, Serena arrived with Henry in a carrier, having cleared her entire afternoon. Astrid's project was impressive. A detailed model showing how skyscrapers used different engineering principles to stay upright. But what struck Serena most was watching Nathan with the children, how patient he was, explaining complex ideas in simple terms, how he made sure every child felt smart and capable. During the parents' tea, while Nathan had to leave for his meeting, Serena sat with Astrid and helped serve cookies to other families. She watched this little girl who'd lost her mother navigate the world with such grace and bravery, and she thought about what kind of person Henry might become with examples like this in his life. Later that evening, Nathan texted, "Astrid hasn't stopped talking about how you came to the tea. Thank you for giving her that. And thank you for the photos. I hated missing it." Serena looked at Henry, asleep in his crib. Mr. Peanuts still tucked beside him, even though she'd bought him a dozen other stuffed animals. She typed back, "Thank you for showing me I don't have to do this alone." Their friendship deepened over months. Nathan would bring Astrid over for dinner, and Serena would discover the joy of family meals that weren't rushed between conference calls. Serena would invite them to the company picnic, where Astrid charmed every executive by asking genuinely interested questions about their jobs. Henry and Astrid developed their own bond, the little girl appointing herself his protector and story reader. One evening, almost a year after that flight, Serena was hosting a charity gala for her company's foundation. She'd invited Nathan and Astrid, insisting they were her personal guests. Nathan had protested that he didn't own a tux, but Serena had laughed and said the party needed more real people and fewer penguins. Watching Nathan help Astrid with her party dress, seeing him naturally take Henry when the baby fussed during Serena's speech, she realized something had shifted fundamentally in her life. The rigid boundaries between CEO and mother had dissolved. She could be both, not perfectly, but authentically. During the gala, one of her board members pulled her aside. "Callahan, I have to say, you seem different lately. More grounded. It's good for the company image, this family-friendly approach." Serena looked across the room where Nathan was teaching Henry and Astrid some kind of elaborate hand-clapping game, all 3 of them giggling. "It's not an approach," she said quietly. "It's just life." The moment that changed everything came 3 months later. Serena had been in back-to-back meetings all day, and her nanny had called in sick. In desperation, she'd called Nathan, who'd immediately offered to pick up Henry from daycare. When she finally made it home at 8 that evening, she found Nathan in her living room, Henry asleep on his chest, while he helped Astrid with her math homework at the coffee table. "I made dinner," he said simply. "It's in the kitchen. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti. But I figured you probably hadn't eaten." Standing there in her doorway, still in her power suit and heels, looking at this man who'd stepped into her life without agenda or expectation, Serena felt the last of her walls crumble. This was what she'd been missing, not just help with Henry, but partnership. Someone who showed up not because they had to, but because that's what you did for people you cared about. "Nathan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. He looked up, concern immediately flooding his features. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," she said, crossing to sit beside him, careful not to wake Henry. "I'm home." Astrid looked up from her homework, that 7 going on 40 wisdom shining in her eyes. "Does this mean we're a family now?" Nathan started to correct her, to explain about boundaries and friendship, but Serena stopped him with a hand on his arm. "What do you think, Astrid? Would you like that?" The little girl considered this seriously. "Henry needs a big sister, and Daddy needs someone to remind him to eat vegetables. And you need us, because Henry can't be an only child, they're weird." Nathan laughed, the sound rich and warm. Astrid, but Serena was laughing too. And Henry woke up gurgling happily, and suddenly they were all laughing, the sound filling the penthouse that had been silent for too long. "We're already a family," Nathan said softly, meeting Serena's eyes. "We have been since that flight. We just took the long way to realize it." 6 months later, at a small ceremony in Central Park with only a handful of guests, Nathan and Serena exchanged vows, while Astrid held Henry, who was now walking and determined to chase every pigeon in sight. Madison, the flight attendant who'd witnessed their first meeting, wept openly from her seat. In his vows, Nathan said, "You taught me that strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about having the courage to let others in." You gave Astrid a mother figure, who shows her that women can conquer the world and still lead with kindness. Serena, who'd memorized her vows like a presentation, forgot every word and spoke from her heart instead. You showed me that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up. You gave Henry a father who teaches by example that gentleness is the greatest strength. You gave me a family when I'd forgotten what that even meant. As they kissed, Astrid announced loudly, "Finally, do you know how long I've been waiting for this?" The guests erupted in laughter. And Henry chose that moment to take his first solo steps toward them, arms outstretched, as if he too had been waiting for this moment of completion. The business press had a field day with the story. "Ice Queen melts for single dad," ran one particularly tabloid headline. But Serena didn't care anymore about the narrative others created. She had her own story, now messier and more complicated than any business strategy, but infinitely more rewarding. At the office, she instituted new policies for parental leave and on-site childcare. Policies that some board members grumbled would hurt the bottom line. But productivity actually increased, as employees felt more supported, more human. Nathan's engineering firm flourished with Serena's business guidance, though he insisted on keeping it small enough that he could still do school pickup. 3 years after that fateful flight, they sat in the same first-class cabin, this time traveling together to a family vacation. Henry, now an energetic 4-year-old, was coloring quietly, while Astrid, 11 and even more precocious, read a book about female pilots. Their youngest, a daughter named Claire after Nathan's late wife, slept peacefully in Serena's arms. A young mother across the aisle was struggling with a crying infant. Without hesitation, Nathan stood up, that same calm presence ready to help. But this time, Serena stood with him. "We've got this," she told the frightened mother, remembering her own terror years ago. "Between us, we've logged thousands of hours with crying babies. First rule, breathe. Second rule, remember that every parent on this plane has been where you are." As they helped calm the baby, Astrid looked up from her book and smiled. "You know," she told Henry, "this is how Mom and Dad met. You were the crying baby." Henry looked horrified. "I was not." "Were too. Dad says you sounded like a fire engine." Watching her children bicker playfully, watching Nathan teach another parent the holding technique that had saved them all that night. Serena thought about the journey from that first flight to now. She'd boarded that plane as a CEO struggling with a crying baby, convinced she had to face everything alone. She'd landed with the beginning of a family she hadn't known she needed. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their descent into Orlando, where they'd spend a week at Disney World, something the old Serena would have considered a waste of valuable work time. But she'd learned that memories were the only currency that truly mattered, and that success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. As they prepared to land, Nathan took her hand, their wedding rings catching the light. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. Serena looked at their children, Henry showing his coloring to anyone who'd look, Astrid mothering baby Claire with the same gentle confidence Nathan had shown with Henry, and thought about all the presentations she'd missed, all the late-night conference calls she'd declined, all the ways her life had become smaller and infinitely larger at the same time. "Only one," she said, squeezing his hand. "That I didn't cry on a plane sooner." The plane touched down smoothly, and as they gathered their things, so many more things now, the debris of a full and chaotic life, Serena caught sight of their reflection in the window. They looked like any other family, a bit frazzled, definitely tired, but undeniably together. The young mother they'd helped approached them at baggage claim. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You gave me hope that it gets easier." "Not easier," Serena corrected gently. "Just better. So much better." As they walked through the airport, Henry on Nathan's shoulders, Astrid pushing Claire's stroller while telling her a story about brave princesses who ran companies and brave knights who saved people from fires, Serena felt the phone in her pocket buzz with what was surely an urgent email about some crisis that needed her immediate attention. She let it ring. She was already attending to something urgent, this beautiful, messy, imperfect life they'd built from one moment of kindness on an airplane. Everything else could wait. After all, she'd learned from the best that sometimes the most important business decisions weren't made in boardrooms, but in the choice to stand up, cross the aisle, and offer help to a stranger who might just become your whole world.